In the beginning, there was Pikmin. Released in 2001, it was a completely new and fresh IP made exclusively for Nintendo's latest console at the time, the Nintendo Gamecube. The story of the game followed Captain Olimar, an alien who crash-landed on a distant planet and had to use the Pikmin to recover ship parts with only a 30-day oxygen supply to make it home to his family. In 2004, a sequel was released which addressed the first game's issues, being the glitchiness and the short length of the game. However, it's up to debate among the fanbase whether Pikmin 2's fix to the length hurt it or bettered the game at hand. The new mechanic of the game, the caves, split the fans. While the first game primarily focused on puzzles with the occasional combat sequence, Pikmin 2 is mostly all combat with a real-time strategy as an afterthought.
I actually talked about this issue for like 35 minutes last time, but Pikmin 2, it's just like discussing politics. Some people love to and some people hate to. I'm kind of in the middle of discussing Pikmin 2, not politics. I could care less. And also, I apologize for my set is not where I normally am. I just moved before I go to college, which means I'm going to move again. Don't call me a failed YouTuber, even though it's partially true. Okay, it's completely true.
I think overall the game is good enough, with some serious flaws. The cave's biggest issues were the randomly generated nature of them. However, the game's above-ground gameplay felt like classic Pikmin, and the world's Piklopedia and Treasure Hoard built a realistic world with great character development for the three protagonists, Olimar, Louie, and the President, and even the ship got some character development. Graphically and musically, the game came out on top as well.
I remember the biggest weight of my life and most wanted game was a sequel to the first two Pikmin games. I was a Pikmin maniac as a kid. Little did I know the road to Pikmin 3 would be a long road ahead and wouldn't be for another 9 years. That's like most of my life, because I'm obviously 10 years old.
Along the road, we did get Olimar in Super Smash Bros. Brawl and re-releases of the first two games on the Nintendo Wii, but still, Pikmin 3 was nowhere to be seen. In 2007, Shigeru Miyamoto said, "I certainly don't think we've seen the last of Pikmin. I definitely would like to do something with them, and I think the Wii interface in particular is very well suited to that franchise." This led to the idea that Pikmin 3 would be released on the Wii, perhaps not soon, but by the end of the console's life cycle. In 2008, Miyamoto had confirmed that Pikmin 3 was indeed in development. 3 years later, in 2011, he stated that development had moved to the Wii U for the console's better graphics, performance, and of course, the new gamepad controller. It was originally intended to be a launch title for the console, releasing in 2012, but it was delayed to the following summer, which finally released in August 2013. What a wait.
Many, including myself, doubted the existence of Pikmin 3 during this time period. The game had a development cycle of 5 years if we count the announcement of 2008. It almost seemed like vaporware, constantly being delayed and pushed around. Pikmin fans felt like they were in limbo, kind of how the wait to Pikmin 4 has been as well. But finally, Pikmin 3 was released, and yeah, it's certainly a thing that we're going to talk about today. Obviously, why do you say stupid stuff like that, Jeff?
Pikmin 3 follows the adventures of a completely new group of aliens from the planet Kopai. Their main mission is to go to PNF 404, like 404, page not found, that's clever, and bring back the fruits to harvest the seeds of them to provide their planet with sustenance and end the famine there. Our new captains are Alpha, Brittany, and Charlie. In typical Pikmin fashion, they crash land on this planet and have to find each other and repair their ship, or else they can't fly back, which is kind of a retread of the concept of both 1 and 2's story. Before I get into the gameplay, we need to discuss these new characters. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I have a lot of problems with Pikmin 3, and these captains are one of them. Listen, if you like these characters or grew up with them, I'm glad. I know a lot of people are going to be upset with me that I don't like their personalities, and I've accepted that. Please remember that it is just my opinion, and all I can do is explain myself and my point. If you don't agree with me, that's fine. Leave me a comment and we'll talk about it. The original Pikmin games had some of the best characters that I've ever had the joy of playing as a Nintendo game, like ever. The first game had Olimar struggling to survive on a new planet, which allowed us to really understand the character and his fears. It's a Nintendo game where you could potentially die and the game would be over, as in you failed. This mimicked real life and encouraged you to play better. Olimar in return would give these detailed journal logs as you played the game and interacted with the Pikmin. This opened himself up to a lot of character development. We learned that Olimar was empathetic, a good dad who loves his family, and someone who was just just curious about the world and Pikmin around him. This factored the player, or at least me, to want to do better for Olimar, as it was harder to see someone you grow so attached to just die within the game. Contrast this to other Nintendo franchises. Mario doesn't talk, Link doesn't talk, the Ice Climbers certainly don't talk. Most Nintendo characters are mute. Olimar, however, was the opposite. He had a ton to say about the world and his discoveries. This gave Pikmin something that no other Nintendo franchise actually had. Now, while this wasn't in 2 as much, 2 still had a ton of character development for Captain Olimar. This was in the aforementioned Piclopedia and Treasure Hoard. We're definitely not on the same scale as 1, but it still helped us to learn a lot about Olimar and was serviceable enough to continue the idea that Olimar was a deep character with a lot to say. Louis was even given great character development to the point where there are fan theories about him being evil. The president and even the ship had great character development and were interesting little side stories to follow. We got these little letters from their family members. It was great character development. The characters in Pikmin 3, at least to me, just don't have the same feel to them. If Olimar in Pikmin 1 was the parallel to real life, the captains in Pikmin 3 are the parallel to a Saturday morning cartoon. They're blatant stereotypes that you would see in a cartoon. Alf being a dork, Brittany being selfish, and Charlie reminds me of a modern-day Knuckles from the Sonic franchise. And like I said, if you enjoy these characters and enjoy the tone that Pikmin 3 sets, I'm glad for you. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if this was a lot of kids' first Pikmin game, and therefore there are a ton of you out there that probably have an attachment to these 3 captains, and like I said, that's fine. But to me, an old-ass gamer, I just didn't find these characters to be on the same scale as the characters in the first 2 games, which is disappointing because that was a big aspect of the first 2 games for me. If I wanted to play as one-note characters with little to say, I would play a Mario game where the game is fun, but on a story note is fruitless and meaningless. That's not to say the captains didn't talk or write their own notes in Pikmin 3, but I just never cared. They either didn't have anything interesting to say or felt like tutorials, but it's just not the characters. It just doesn't feel like the game takes itself very seriously. This rubber ducky flying around symbolizes Pikmin 3. It's a game that would rather be funny rather than the first 2 games that try to be serious, and if there were humor in them, it would have been dark or grim. I imagine that in this game they wanted to appeal more to kids, which would make sense, but the rest of the game, challenge-wise, definitely doesn't feel like it's for kids, which we'll get into. Olimar and Louis also appear in this game unplayable, but to me they come off as shadows of their former selves, and again, feel like cartoon characters rather than what they were in the previous games. I don't know, it just didn't feel right. The whole tone of the game is off. If Pikmin had established a tone that was serious and dark in the last 2 games, Pikmin 3 establishes a new one which is light and humorful. Is humorful a word? I don't know. The bland tone of the game wouldn't even be an issue if it wasn't for the fact that Pikmin 3 desperately wants to be a narrative. I don't mean narrative in the sense of the first game that occasionally jumped into story through Olimar's writings. I mean a narrative in the sense that the game wants you to jump between specific worlds to complete story-based objectives, and the story is just so damn repetitive. The entire time you're just chasing the cosmic drive key to power your ship. You go to point A, oh, it's not there. Go to point B, oh, it's not there either. A signal's coming from here, gotta go here. To go back to Mario, it reminds me of the princesses in another castle trope, something that the first 2 games didn't follow, again making Pikmin 3 an outlier. If I wanted to play a Nintendo game where we were just chasing something again, I would just play Mario. It adds an element of linearity to it which I feel no Pikmin game should have. The first 2 Pikmin games had some linearity to it, to be fair. You couldn't go to different worlds until you had X amount of ship parts unlocked, or in the case of 2, until you got the specific items that increased your map capabilities, but you still had some choice and direction to choose where you wanted to go next. It wasn't like the game was pushing you and shoving you in a certain direction. In this game, the game has to hold your hand almost the entire time. Now, I just don't think Pikmin is the type of game that works as a narrative. For one, even characters such as Olimar and Louis from the first 2 games wouldn't hold up an entire story, and that's what the first 2 games did right. While they talked kind of to the side and let the player explore the world around them and make their own discoveries. This only immersed the player in the world around them, and it's a shame that it's missing from this entry. It just makes Pikmin 3 its own beast, which which I'm sure some people liked, but to me it just made the game a little bit worse. As a kid, I played Pikmin for the story. I learned to read through these games. When Olimar was brought into Smash Brothers, my attachment to the character made me thrilled. When Alpha was confirmed, I couldn't have cared less. This is a mute point for most people, and I didn't mean to ramble, but I need to discuss why I don't like Pikmin 3 as much as 1 and 2. And yes, I know I said in my last video that I think 2 was the worst in the series, but after playing 3, I think that 3 is actually the worst. I'm getting off topic and into conclusion Terry, where obviously the video is far from over. So let's rewind a little bit. Like the first 2 games, you use the Pikmin to interact with the world around you to bring back items to base, solve puzzles, build bridges. I already talked about the 3 main Pikmin types in my previous reviews, but for a brief reminder, red Pikmin can go through fire, yellows can be thrown higher and survive electricity, and blue Pikmin can swim through water. New to Pikmin 3 are 2 new types of Pikmin. The first of these types are the rock Pikmin, which feel like a much more balanced version of the purple Pikmin from the predecessor. They do hit an enemy much harder on impact, but they can't latch onto them, meaning you have to re-whistle them to your side to re-throw them. This poses as a risk-reward for the player, as they are good in combat, but only if you're able to correctly use them. Rock Pikmin are also helpful in combat as they can survive enemies that crush Pikmin, meaning that the Wollywogs are no longer a threat. Yeah! Okay, side note, but where were these in the second game? A game that had things that crushed your Pikmin like every 2 seconds in the caves. They would have been much more helpful there than in this game, but whatever. Rock Pikmin can also destroy crystals and glass walls, which often hold fruits or things you need to progress. Like I said, Rock Pikmin feel like a much more balanced purple Pikmin. I think that they're one of the best additions to Pikmin 3, even if their use isn't too much later in the game. The other new Pikmin type are the winged Pikmin. The idea of these Pikmin are that they can fly, going above water and being able to attack enemies that are aerial based. The trade-off is that they are much weaker in combat compared to the other Pikmin, doing very minimal damage. Another issue with them is that they're unfortunately broken. You can use them to completely skip puzzles in this game, which is upsetting to me. Overall, the 2 new types of Pikmin are great though, and feel much more balanced than the party we got in Pikmin 2. Purple Pikmin and white Pikmin do return in this game, but only in the challenge mode, which I'll get into later. A brief reminder for those who haven't played Pikmin games, purple stun enemies on impact, do 3 times the damage and carry 10 times their own weight, while white Pikmin dig buried treasure and can survive poisonous attacks. I do think it was the right idea to replace purple and white Pikmin with the rock and wing Pikmin in this game. I can't even imagine what it'd be like to have 7 different Pikmin types in the field at once. You'd have what, like 13 of each Pikmin on the field? This was a necessary trade-off for the game in my opinion and only enhances it. Plus, purples are pretty useless when it comes to solving puzzles and only broke combat sections in the previous game, so their omission isn't one I'm too upset about. The Pikmin start off as leaf Pikmin, meaning that they're weak and slower, but you can level them up to flower pick them by either using nectar or by leaving them in the dirt over time. Oddly, the nectar in this game was very few and far between. Maybe I wasn't looking in the right place, but I couldn't really find any grass that you could pluck for nectar like in the previous games. Only finding eggs and flint beetles as a source for nectar, even those were pretty scarce. As such, my Pikmin were very rarely all flowered. It was never an issue that I had with the previous Pikmin games, so it felt very odd to me here. Again, I may not have been looking hard enough, so I won't blame it on the game, and I don't know if anyone else had this issue. I couldn't see it in any other reviews, but to me this was an issue that I experienced. Another thing you can do to level up your Pikmin, and definitely something crucial when it comes to some bosses and enemies, is take berries back to your base to net Ultra Spicy sprays. The Ultra Spicy spray hypes up your Pikmin, making them faster and stronger. Oddly enough, the Ultra Bitter spray from the second game no longer exists here, which feels like a mistake. I don't really see a good reason why this was omitted. I'm sure it was kind of a cheap move, but it was really important for backup when there was nothing else that you could do in a fight. Here, if your Pikmin are stuck or in mid-animation of being eaten, they're as good as dead. The 3 captains make getting the berries and sprays very easy in this game, as it's best to just leave one of them with the Pikmin getting the berries, since in this game, they'll actually run back and forth between the base and the berry plant all day if you want them to. This is one of the best changes in Pikmin 3. It doesn't just occur with the berry plants, but also with the new bridges, haystacks, and even buildable plates that help you traverse throughout the environment. I really love this feature. It's good because you can set 2 or 3 Pikmin to the task and they'll take care of it all day if you want them to, while you can take care of other tasks, say with another captain. Something else that's new to Pikmin 3 is that all Pikmin are able to use and carry bomb rocks with them, not just the yellow Pikmin. This was a cool and really good decision in my opinion. Only problem is that you can't just throw a Pikmin holding a bomb rock without them throwing the bomb. In Pikmin 1, you could throw a bomb rock and it wouldn't explode unless you were near an enemy or a wall. Still, at least Pikmin 3 doesn't have bomb rocks falling from the sky unfairly and randomly like they did in 2, so that's a plus for this game. Control-wise, this game is one of the most interesting games to play due to the Wii U's main gimmick, the gamepad. I was going to record gamepad footage for this review with my cell phone or something, but I didn't feel like the footage was proper, so I just omitted it. Some of the action, and the reason why sometimes in this footage you'll just see overhead views of the map, takes place on the gamepad. This includes the new feature of transporting a captain anywhere on the map you've unlocked. This in itself is a great feature that really enhances the gameplay, especially considering that you have 3 captains this time around. Multitasking is easier and better than ever. You can have one captain working towards one task, while the other captains say, fight a boss. It really alleviates the issue of Pikmin 2, where you had 2 captains, but very rarely was it actually useful to the gameplay or aspect of real-time strategy. It makes Pikmin 3 feel like a real-time strategy game, especially in the challenge mode of the game, which, hey, an RTS was what the first game was going for, so it's definitely something that Pikmin 3 improves upon. The gamepad is recreated in Pikmin 3 in the hands of the captain that you're currently using. It's called the Cope Pad. You can intercept video calls from your teammates on the Cope Pad, along with picking up these data files scattered throughout the map. The data files I can see being helpful to new players. They're basically the game's explanation of the world around you and can be reviewed at any time. Another thing you can do with the Cope Pad is take pictures of your Pikmin, a feature I never really cared for, but one that I imagine was pretty fun back when Miiverse was around and everyone was able to share photos directly from their Wii U. Pikmin 3 uses the gamepad pretty well in my opinion. I wouldn't say it's a game that couldn't have been done on another console, nor is it a reason to own a Wii U, but it gets the job done and doesn't completely feel shoehorned in. Now, the only problem with the gamepad is it's not convenient to use if you don't want to use it. What I mean by that is that if you prefer using the Wiimote and Nunchuck or the Pro Controller, you still have to use the gamepad to move captains or intercept video calls. This means that you have to have it sitting on your lap or on a kickstand nearby, and you have to put down the controller you're currently using just to do so. I personally would have used the Wiimote and Nunchuck combo for this game, or even the Pro Controller, but was turned off by the idea of this odd control scheme of constantly switching controllers, so I just used the gamepad. I don't understand why they couldn't have just programmed it to be a simple option you have by pausing the game and using the analog stick to control where a captain would go. It shows that they really wanted to show the new console owners a reason to use the Wii U gamepad, but it comes off as forced and makes the way that many players play this game a pain in the ass. The rest of the game controls okay, I guess. To me, it feels worse than the control scheme in Pikmin 1 and 2, if not for the new gamepad Wiimote combo I just mentioned. Gone are the camera controls of the first 2 games, which lets you view from many different angles and views, but rather this game has a free roam camera in the second stick. Well, kind of free roam, you can't move up and down, only left and right from a fixed position. This works okay. If you're using the gamepad, your aim of the Pikmin is controlled by how far you push the control stick. This gets disorienting, especially if you lock on, and I never found it as accurate as the GameCube controls for the first 2 games, while at the same time, it's definitely more versatile since you can throw Pikmin closer or farther. It's an okay middle ground. You use the A or X button to throw Pikmin, ZR button to whistle Pikmin, and the B button, or a motion control movement of the gamepad, to disband your Pikmin. And this is dangerous because if you're playing with the gamepad and move suddenly and your game registers the movement as a disbanding shake, your Pikmin will disband into trouble before you can say, "Eat my frickin' doo-doo crusted Schwartz." New to Pikmin 3 is the lock-on system, booting out the swarming feature of the first 2 games. Previously, you would use the C-stick or bottom of the Wiimote D-pad and move Pikmin around to handle tasks, but now this is replaced by a charge attack. You perform this by pressing the ZL button with the B button press. This is an unfortunate change to the game in my opinion. Swarming just worked and felt so much more natural, to me at least. While the charge is better for taking down some enemies, performing certain tasks is much harder with the charge. For example, when you're trying to pick up buried fruit, the Pikmin won't all latch onto it, rather they'll all stand around like idiots around the fruit. Nectar? Yeah, just forget about that. You can't swarm the Pikmin with the nectar, only charge at it. This makes leveling up specific Pikmin to flowers all the more a pain to take care of. This also breaks the game. Remember how I said winged Pikmin were broken? Well, using this feature is exactly how the game can be straight up taken advantage of. Charging isn't terrible, it just doesn't have the versatility and feel of the swarming that the first two games offered us. And that's a problem to me, because this game almost took a decade to be made, and the new features in general are either on par or even worse than the games released before Obama was president. And that's the problem with Pikmin 3. It either is okay or does exactly what the Gamecube games did. Also new to Pikmin 3, the captains are not able to only throw Pikmin, but throw each other. This is actually a really cool mechanic that allows for some interesting puzzles down the line, but none that I feel really tap the full potential of this idea. Mainly you just throw the captains with Pikmin across ledges, and that's the extent of this idea. But when the game does something cool with throwing captains, it's where it shines bright. For example, the beginning of the game has Alph and Brittany separated from each other, and you have to throw Pikmin back and forth between each other with specific types to build bridges and take down specific walls. I wish that they thought of more ideas like this, as it's one of the best aspects of the game. You can also dodge in this game with the press of the left and right on the D-pad. This is very rarely useful, although in combat it does help a bit more. To survive on this planet, you have to collect fruits. The fruits are then juiced in this extremely laggy cutscene that makes the Wii U look like crap, and as long as you have one fruit juice, you can survive another day. Run out of fruit juice and the game is over. This is a decent middle ground between 1 and 2. It pushes you to survive, but gives a very lenient time period. By the end of the game, I had like 60 days worth. It's a decent middle ground, like I said, but the problem with the fruits, and a big problem with Pikmin 3 in general, is that this game has both of these tasks going on at once. You're charged with collecting all the fruits and also following the narrative I mentioned earlier. This does not work in my opinion, and doesn't encourage exploration. Want to collect fruits? Well, the game doesn't want you to. It'd rather you be going down a linear path and uncovering the story. The fruits feel like an afterthought. They could have just done one or the other, or preferably the fruits a la classic Pikmin gameplay. Look at the previous two Pikmin games. Yet again, Pikmin 1 just had you looking for ship parts, while the narrative took a back seat. In Pikmin 2 there were two tasks, but the game split them up, being the first task to collect 10,000 Pokos and the second task to save Louie. This is how Pikmin 3 should have done it in my opinion. The series has done two ideas for a story right before. Another issue with this setup is that you don't get specific Pikmin until you progress the story to unlock new worlds. I unlocked Blue Pikmin on day 14 of my playthrough. Again, going back to the predecessors, Pikmin 1 I unlocked them on the third day, and Pikmin 2 I unlocked them on day 5. There is no point in locking up the Pikmin so far into the story, and I'm not talking speedruns or a really experienced player, I'm talking a casual playthrough like the one that I had. It makes you feel as if you're traversing through the world like, oh, there's water, won't even bother with that until I move forward and go to point B to progress the story. Again, Pikmin 1 and 2 were linear to an extent, but for the most part you could do what you wanted. This is something I enjoyed in the first two games that I feel shouldn't have been omitted in this game. I miss being able to explore without worrying about other tasks. Pikmin should not be a linear game with objectives. The fruits, at the end of the day, while there are 66 of them, just feel like an afterthought to what the game wants, the story. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if people would rather have a story to their Pikmin game, considering that a lot of people grew up with this one, and that's fine. I'm not saying the game is bad, but rather just not what I look for when I play a Pikmin game. Like the previous games, you have 15 minutes every day in-game to collect fruits or complete the story objectives. And returning from the first two games, again, man, I'm really talking about those games a lot, I wonder why. Any Pikmin left nilly-willy on the field will die overnight. This adds a lot of risk-reward and is something I like with the Pikmin games, but also at the same time feels antiquated and causes a lot of problems with the gameplay, which we'll talk about later. The base enemies in this game are more fair in comparison to 2, but there's still a heavy emphasis on combat in this game. Lots of enemies do make a return, such as Bulborbs, Sheargrubs, and as I mentioned, Wollywogs, and even some obscure ones from Pikmin 2, and there's a lot of new ones as well. The new enemies in this game range from alright to pretty cool. A lot of them do kind of the same thing, and the idea just remains to charge or throw Pikmin quickly. There are a lot of new elemental enemies, meaning enemies that require a specific Pikmin type to take down, which is something that this game does differently than the first two games, as there weren't a ton of elemental enemies that gave you a reason to use specific Pikmin, save for certain examples such as when an enemy was in water and you had to use blue Pikmin. There are two tiers of bosses in this game, mini-bosses and regular bosses. And you know what time it is right now?
Time to piss off the internet!
The bosses in Pikmin 3, to me, are annoying. I don't enjoy them. I think they look cool and show off the Wii U's power, I guess, but there are a few reasons I don't like them. I don't think the actual fights are a problem, although to me they were kind of difficult. Rather, the problem with the bosses was the fact that they took up so much time of your day. If you didn't prepare to spend your whole in-game day fighting a boss, just forget about being able to take it down in time before the end of the day sequence. There were many times where I would take down a boss and I wouldn't even have time to bring back the fruits, the corpse, and whatever else the boss dropped. And so not only did the boss say, take 5 minutes of my day, now on the next day I have to backtrack all the way back up and bring back all the droppings, taking another 5 minutes of my next day. And again, I'm not talking speedruns where I assume a boss could be taken down in mere moments. I'm talking about what I experienced in my casual playthrough. It unfortunately feels like padding to me. Compare this to the first 2 games where the bosses were challenging, sure, but they didn't take that much of your day up. The burrowing snagret and the armored cannon beetles are good examples of this. You go in, do your thing without it being a huge event, and they're done, and you can continue the gameplay. Pikmin 2, maybe the bosses were a bit longer than 1, but they weren't restricted by a time limit since most of them were underground. So I guess my point is, when I said the time limit system felt antiquated, it's because it doesn't enhance the gameplay all the time. And again, this is what Pikmin 3 has been guilty of. It doesn't know what it wants to be, a narrative or a collectathon, spend time or rush everything to make it back, a hard game or a children's cartoon game. Pikmin 3 unfortunately suffers from an identity crisis, and I felt that while playing the game. Now granted, these boss fights themselves weren't bad, it was just the sheer time that it took up. I will say though, it could have been me and my bad gaming skills, but I was really struggling with these boss fights. I lost 83 Pikmin on the Quaggled Miraclops. I'm not going to knock this as a negative of the game, because I hear a lot of people think that the bosses are easy, and you know what, they probably are and I just suck, so I'm just going to let this one slide. One boss that I thought was really awesome was the Hornet Maestro. You use your winged Pikmin to take down the bee minions. I thought this boss was generally pretty fair and fun to fight, and gave you a reason to use the winged Pikmin. I will give this boss fight a positive point in the favor of Pikmin 3, as Pikmin 2 never really had type-specific bosses, besides spiders which required the yellow Pikmin. The same kind of deal goes with the Armored Maudad, which specifically needs your newfound rock Pikmin to break the shell, so you could use your red Pikmin to attack him. I really appreciate these bosses that gave your new Pikmin an actual purpose. The Behemoth Phosphat, or however you pronounce it, was my favorite boss fight in the game, hands down. Remember my Pikmin 2 review where I talked about how great the giant bread bug fight was and how it was awesome because it required you to do something different? Well, the Behemoth Phosphat really took this principle to heart. Basically, you have to go around and light up electrical wiring to be able to attack him and see him. I thought this was incredibly clever and is Pikmin at its best, as it's a good mix of combat combined with puzzle solving. I just wish the damn time limit wasn't there. It kills any enjoyment I might get out of these boss fights. While on the subject of the boss fights and the time limit, I wanted to make a fair point. They really could have easily fixed this issue completely with a little bit of playtesting. And again, I take a look back at Pikmin 2, because you know what? In that game, time stopped completely in the caves, giving you all the time in the world to fight the bosses. My point is with this, if they broke the time rule there, they could have just broken it in this game. Give the players more time to take on the bosses at their leisure. Again, it wouldn't be the first time that the time rule was broken. Instead, while there might be some very clever boss fights, they're just pains to take down for reasons I've already discussed. Hell, some of these boss fights took place in caves as well. They could have very easily at least slowed down the time limit and it would have fit with the Pikmin canon. Some of these bosses were pretty clever in their execution. The Shaggy Longlegs in one of his 2 boss appearances would move back and forth between 2 areas. You had to have 2 army of Pikmin nearby with captains and it required you to switch back and forth. This to me was very clever and gave me a reason to use the 2 captains. The mini bosses I think were much better done. They took less time out of your day, were more fun to fight since you knew it wasn't going to take all of your day, and I feel as if they were what Pikmin should be. The big bosses just ultimately feel overindulgent to me, and I'm sure I'm in the minority on that, but it is what it is.
However, the biggest crime that this game has when it comes to the enemies is that there is no Piklopedia this time around. There's nowhere to read about them. This is something Pikmin 2 perfected in my opinion. It had hours of dialogue to read about the enemies in the Piklopedia. Some may argue that you can read about the fruits in this game, which, okay, great, why don't I just take a trip to the frickin' supermarket if I want to read about fruit. My point is, it's upsetting that something that should have been a Pikmin staple was omitted from the 3rd game.
The levels this time around are thankfully all new, not like the first two games where they took one's levels in 2 and just remixed them. The new levels in 3 have good ideas, but never do anything too crazy, and to an extent feel a tad similar with each other, but overall are great level designs that offer for fun challenges and puzzles for the player. The one that had the most crazy concept was the Twilight River, which has you going back and forth with these lily pads that go up and down the stream. This is a cool idea, but be careful because sometimes your Pikmin won't make the jump and you'll realize this far too late. Besides that, the levels never really did anything too crazy, which is a tad disappointing. I'd have preferred to see different level concepts and ideas thrown in the mix. The levels are good, but again come off as a bit samey. The best part about Pikmin 3, at least to me, is that this game has some of the best graphics and music to grace and bless my ears and eyes, at least for a title released in 2013. I get that the Wii U is underpowered, but this game could have easily stood on its own as an Xbox One or PS4 game graphically. Nintendo knew that this game would have been their first in HD and took full advantage of it. Not only does it look beautiful in terms of sheer graphics, but also in the stylistic decisions that they made. Fruits look nice and tasty in this game, and also new to Pikmin 3 is that the levels have weather effects on them. This is awesome. Sometimes it'll be raining, sometimes it'll be cloudy, and while this has no bearing on the gameplay as far as I know, it's a nice addition that makes the game look like one of a kind. Musically, this game is excellent as well, and I strongly encourage all of you to take a look at the official soundtrack. This is one of the best parts of Pikmin 3, and even if the game to me is inferior to the previous two, it's superior to them graphically and musically. One of the weirdest parts of this game is that it's oddly short. For a game that was in development for as long as it was, it really only has 4 worlds to explore. This is disappointing. It made sense in Pikmin 1 and 2 to have a handful of worlds. Not only were they limited by the Gamecube, but Pikmin 1 in specific was intended to be a tech demo. So to me it's very odd that they only made 4 main worlds for this game. As such, it's a pretty short game. It's close to the length of Pikmin 1, as I only spent about 8 hours capturing footage for the main story for Pikmin 3. For a $60 game in 2013, this is kind of embarrassing in my opinion. There is more replay value to be seen in the challenge mode, which I guess I can just discuss here, just for the fact that alone that I really don't know how to splice it in properly with the rest of the review. Challenge mode is hands-on one of the best aspects of Pikmin 3, and is the best challenge mode in the Pikmin series. There are 3 specific sections: collect treasures, defeat enemies, and boss mode. Collecting treasures has you, collecting not just treasures, but enemy corpses as well. Every cent counts here. This mode is really awesome for the sheer amount of replayability it offers. There are certain rankings that you can strive for, again enhancing the replayability, trying to figure out how to optimize your route properly. It makes it really addicting. The level designs here are just excellent as well, and they even made DLC for the people who really enjoyed this mode, which I actually recommend you buy, just for the fact that one day it won't be on the eShop anymore. This encapsulates everything that makes Pikmin good to me. Puzzle solving, addicting gameplay, fair enemies. Collect treasures is a mode that makes Pikmin 3 feel worth it to me. It overshadows the bad parts of the game and is almost a saving grace. The battle enemies in boss rush mode are what they offer. Just fighting enemies, which is fine, and you also get ranks for that as well, meaning this entire mode is also replayable. There's also a 2-player mode called Bingo Battle, but unfortunately I haven't played it as none of my friends give a rat's ass about Pikmin. Sorry about that. I know it's not proper for a review, but I'd recommend looking up a review to see if it's good or not.
Well, here's where I'd end things, but there's one more major aspect of Pikmin 3 that needs to be discussed. The end of the game. The end of the game.
Okay, Pikmin 3 is a game that has problems, sure. The gameplay being split between 2 different objectives, the tone of the game is one of them, no Piklopedia, and there's a ton of other issues with this game. This game is flawed. It's not a bad game, but I wouldn't say it's an excellent game either. However, this end of the game, to me, is one of the worst sequences of any Nintendo game I ever played. And I want to iterate, even if I have a series where I purposely crap on games, I don't enjoy playing a game just to complain about it, especially in my Jeff Compass series. If a game is good, I want to lavish in it and explain why. If it's mixed like this game, it's my duty to explain what the game did right or wrong. If it's bad, well, then it usually goes to shovelware. My point being, I understand that a lot of people actually like this end of the game level, and that's completely fine. You're justified to have your own opinion. However, I did not. I thought it was frustrating and an awful conclusion to the original Pikmin trilogy. The idea behind it is that this creature, the Plasm Wraith, captures Olimar, and after an initial mini-boss fight, you have to transport Olimar through a cave while the Plasm Wraith continues to chase you. This wasn't an idea doomed from the start in my opinion, but rather the execution behind it is awful. For one, what do you notice about this footage? The time limit still exists, and this cave section is long. And again, we're not talking speed runs or optimized playthroughs, we're talking a good old casual playthrough where, yes, this section will take you a while. Make progress through the cave and then all of a sudden, time is up, pretty much meaning that every 15 days that you're playing, you have to stop dead in your tracks, watch some cutscenes for the day, save the game, and then go back the next day. To make matters worse, when you land, you have to rewatch the cutscenes, carry back Olimar to wherever you had him last, which takes up a big portion of your day again, and try to make it further before the game inevitably pulls the plug out from underneath you. This is an upsetting experience. Again, I don't understand why this portion of the game couldn't have just been untimed. This is my very thesis of my review of Pikmin 3 and symbolizes the issues to the game to a T. It's trying to do too much with too many ideas and ultimately lacks a clear direction which splits the player's focus in two. Even if this section wasn't timed, it's extremely frustrating. You'll often accidentally whistle your Pikmin off of Captain Olimar because your Pikmin disperse in the middle of him, and sometimes he just catches up to you and you have to fight him in the middle of this dark cavern. I'm not going to say it's unnecessarily fair, but sometimes you have to face a dead end that obviously halts your progress, and you have to scurry about to bring your Pikmin and Olimar to safety. It doesn't work. It's awful. And great, not only Pikmin 3 is trying to be a collectathon and narrative, now it's trying to be a stealth game as well, in the final level. Finally, when you do make it out of the cave, which took me personally like an hour, you have this final boss fight. And as much as I crapped on this game today, I do have to say this boss fight is pretty good. Basically, the idea of it is that you have to knock off the Plasm Wraith's goo and destroy it to bring down his health bar. There are elemental attacks during this, which requires the use of specific Pikmin. It's somewhat fair, although still difficult, and all in all, the boss fight itself I feel is the best of the three bosses in the Pikmin trilogy, at least for the final ones. And that's it. One lame thing is that if you didn't get all the fruit, you don't get a chance to go back like you did in Pikmin 2. Nah, your save file is over unless you go back in time to a previous day, so make sure you get all the collectibles. Pikmin 3 has virtually no post-game, which is why the mission mode is such a great saving grace. Pikmin 3, all in all, is a fine game. I didn't want to just crap on it. I really wanted to go in depth as to why I feel like this is the weakest Pikmin game. The main issue with it is its lack of direction. It doesn't know what it wants to be, and it's very clear the product was a product of development hell. The main reason I wanted to do this retrospective is because Pikmin is a series very near and dear to my heart. I have sunk so many hours into this game series since I was a young kid. I have so many memories of playing the Pikmin games. However, unfortunately, doing this retrospective has brought down the series for me. Pikmin 2 and 3, more specifically, are very flawed games. Pikmin 1, I feel, was the best of the series for its tone, Olimar's development, and world it built that just felt so real and crucial, combined with the fun combat and puzzle solving. Pikmin 2 tried to build upon this idea, but padded it out with these awful caves, and for what reason? To meet the fans' demand for a longer game? Sometimes a game is just short. But that's the thing, if Pikmin 3 was so short and tried to go back to the original style of Pikmin, why didn't it resonate with me? Well, I mean, I don't need to go over that again. I spent almost 40 minutes talking about it. But my point is Pikmin 3 genuinely tried, but just came up flat in the end. At the same time, I don't think Pikmin 2 are bad games. There's genuine enjoyment in these two video games. If you enjoy them, I'm glad. The world is a cruel place, and when anyone can find enjoyment in something, it means the world to me. To me, I still enjoy them and hold them near to my heart. Perhaps it's just a matter of getting older and understanding terms like padding and charging that make me more prone to the bad decisions that these games made.
Although it's lowered my opinion about the series during this retrospective, Pikmin is still one of my favorite series of all time. There doesn't exist such thing as a perfect game anyway. Every game has at least one flaw. My favorite video game of all time, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, is very flawed by a lot of accords. Well, I guess the next question is, Pikmin 4, when and where and how? I think the series has so much potential. It's only up from here. So in conclusion, Pikmin is... Oh my god, I forgot. Hey, Pikmin. Damn it!